If you've started to plan or build your no-code app, you've probably already run into instances where you feel really overwhelmed. Like there are just so many things you need to be focusing on at once that you can't really make any good headway in any one given direction. Well, in this video, we're going to simplify everything. You see, there are 8 main components you need to be planning and working on as you're going from idea to first launch with your no-code app. We're going to talk about what each of those 8 components is and exactly in which order you should be focusing on and working on them. And look, each of these 8 things is pretty big, so you can't do everything at once. It's just not possible to do all of that and to do it well. So we need to break them apart and focus on one thing at a time and the right things at the right time, because even the right things at the wrong times are still the wrong things. Now, before we dive into each of those 8 specific components, you need to understand exactly what your idea to launch process is going to look like with your app. Now, on the screen here, you see a ladder, and from that idea to launch process, you're going to be aiming to get from the bottom of the ladder all the way up to the top. Now, you have to, before you start your app's development or anything else, scope out your app's different versions. You're not going to be building your entire full scope version of your app right out of the gates. You need to build the first version, then get user feedback, make iterations, and roll it out from there. Now, we're not going to go through an entire scoping process in this video. If you need help with that, or if you haven't already done it, then head to coachingnocodeapps.com/perfect-pilot. That link will be in the description below. That's going to help you scope the most valuable versions of your app so that you launch with the highest value version first. Once you've done that, you're going to find that your app's entire feature set is going to fall into 4 specific categories, which we're going to place on our ladder here. So the first version of your app is going to be made up of must-have features. Must-have features are the ones that are required for initial product validation. Now, after that, you're going to focus on your should-have features. These are the ones that must be in the app for users to consistently use the app in real-life scenarios. Now, after that, you're going to move on to could-have features of your app. These are the ones that could improve the user's experience, but aren't actually necessary to solve the core problem your app is solving. And then the last version here is won't have features. Now, these are won't have features for now. Doesn't mean you won't have them ever. It just means that they're not going to be relevant until you have a certain volume of users on board your app. Now, those 8 components that you're going to be focusing on and working on are going to fit in around these 4 versions of your app that you're going to be developing and rolling out to your target market. And one thing I want to make sure you understand is that at the top of all of this is your vision. Now, vision might sound a little bit woo-woo for some people, but really this is just your goal for your app and yourself. So think about 2 specific things. What is the impact you want your app to have upon your users and their lives or their businesses? The second thing is, what is the impact you want your app to have upon your own life? Now, you have to focus on the impact with your users because obviously you need to be solving a problem and making a change within your market. But you also have to focus on what your own personal goals are and what your needs are, because both are important to keep you building, growing, and improving your app and business over the long run. When you have that vision defined, that's important because it is going to inform everything else you do. It's going to be the decider for what the must-have features are that should be included in your app, as well as those should, could, and won't have for now features. So essentially, once you have that vision in place, you can sort of backwards plan as you scope out your app. And again, if you need help with the scoping process, head to coachingnocodeapps.com/perfect-pilot. Okay, so now that we have an understanding of what that idea to launch process looks like from a high level, we need to now go in and fill in the gaps with those 8 specific components. Now, in no particular order, because we'll get there in just a minute, The things that you're going to need to be focusing on are, of course, the actual development of your app. You're also going to need to choose and set up a domain. You're going to have a landing page in place to bring users on board. Of course, you have to have a pricing structure. You also need scalable and automated marketing practices. You're going to need a full website with terms and policies. You also need a pilot user outreach plan that you can execute on, and you need business systems. Now, again, thinking about doing all of that at once can feel like a lot because it is a lot, but those are all going to fit in to this ladder, which we're going to go over now. One of the biggest things that you're going to be doing is, of course, the actual development of your app. Now, that happens alongside everything else. And if you're building the app yourself using no-code tools and you've never done so before, that is going to take work because not only are you building your app, but you're also developing a skill set alongside that. And that's why it's even more important to make sure you're focusing on the right things at the right times, because it's easy to let the scale kind of tip out of balance and to enter that zone of overwhelm. The very first thing we're going to focus on is when you're building the must-have version of your app. In other words, the features that are going to allow you to validate your product itself. You simultaneously need to be choosing and, of course, setting up your custom domain. This is one of those basic things that just needs to be done. Now, the good news is you really don't need to stress over what your domain name is. We're not going to go into that in full in this video, but just choose something that is relevant to what your app does, who it helps, or what it helps them achieve, and try not to get stuck on a domain that costs thousands of dollars. That's just not necessary, especially at this stage. And the second thing that you need to be doing is setting up that pilot user outreach plan. And you actually need to start executing on that as well. So while you are developing those must-have features, I want you to be reaching out to the users who are going to come on board and run through your pilot testing with you. It's so important that you do that during development versus waiting until after that first version of your app is complete, because you want those users lined up and waiting to come on board right when you're done. As soon as you finish those must-have features and you bring those pilot users on board, you're going to almost be ready to climb that next rung of the ladder. So this is where you're doing your initial user testing and, again, validating the product you have. Now, while you are doing this testing and getting that validation, you need to be focusing on your landing page, number one. And notice that I say landing page singular, not landing pages, because you really only need one landing page, not even a full-blown website, to move forward into the next stage. So just keep that in mind. Now, the other thing you need to be focusing on is your pricing. How you're going to structure your pricing. Exactly how much you're going to charge. Are there going to be multiple tiers? What type of pricing model are you going to be using? Now, it's important that you actually wait to create that landing page and to solidify your pricing structure until you are actually doing this testing here. So we are in testing with that pilot app. The reason being, the feedback that you're getting from those users is going to inform what is on that landing page and what that pricing structure looks like. You must get validation for your product, number one, before you even start working on those things. Otherwise, they're just not relevant. And you must have the specific feedback from your users to help you make decisions on what the landing page and the pricing should look like. Otherwise, you're just making an assumption. And there's no point in doing that when instead you can move forward with feedback from your actual users. Once you've completed that phase, you're going to be moving on to the should have features of your app. And remember, these are the features that are going to enable your users to consistently use the app in real life scenarios. So while you are building the should have features, and this should not be a huge development phase, these should really be some minor tweaks, just a few additions so that, again, they can just use it consistently. While you're doing that, I want you to be focusing on your actual website and Things like your policies. Aside from that, you need to start testing your marketing. Remember, in those first couple of stages of development, your must have and your should have features, you're still going through validation. You are going through pilot testing and making sure your product actually solves the problem that it's intended to solve. And you're going through beta testing, making sure that users can consistently apply the app to their real life scenarios and achieve the outcome. Now, when you're in those phases, you don't need a full-blown, perfectly professionally designed website because it's just not necessary. You need the validation first to even justify investing in something like that, whether it's time or money, and you need the feedback to inform what goes on that website. And likewise, in these initial stages, the marketing that you're doing should really be more manual. There's no reason to have automated, scalable marketing practices in place yet before you've even gone through these testing phases. Otherwise, you're just going to be throwing away money or throwing away time spent on these automations because just like you have to validate your app, you have to validate your marketing, your messaging, your outreach. Then you can scale on top of that. Now, that being said, once you get that validation that users can use the app consistently to achieve a specific outcome, well, then you're going to be climbing that next rung. And that is when you need to go ahead and set up that scalable, that more automated marketing. So, what we're going to put on this side is scalable marketing. And on this side, automated marketing. And these are both a little bit different. Automated marketing is when you actually quite literally add automation to your marketing practices. So maybe you're using social media scheduling tools, for example, or an email marketing platform to help grow your user base. It's important that you don't do this too early. If you set this up before you've actually tested and validated that messaging and marketing like we talked about, then you're going to be automating the marketing that goes out for your app without actually knowing whether or not it works. So you need to understand what acquisition channel works for you in your app. What's the messaging that resonates? And then you can start automating that and spreading it more widely than you can do by yourself. Now, scalable marketing is similar but a little bit different. When we talk about scalable marketing, we're thinking about paid ads because, again, if you've tested that messaging and marketing, then you can actually pay to send it out to more people than you could even reach with your automated marketing. So scalable marketing is both automated but also scalable in that you're paying for a much wider reach. Now, you don't need to go all in on this right away. You can take baby steps to start, to get comfortable with it, and to continue validating your message because you can continue fine-tuning that, and that's going to lead you farther up the ladder. Once you've gotten past this stage of your development and testing and past all of the other components that go along with that, it's going to pop you up into this second stage of the expansion of your app. Now, this is where you're going to be focusing more so on business systems. And it's important to understand that during these stages over here, you're really more so looking toward growth for both your app and your user base, your business, and even for you personally with your own lifestyle. I actually want to take a step back here to simplify this even further. So when you're going through the must-have development of your app and the domain, the pilot outreach, that's when you're actually focusing on getting your product right. The goal of this stage is product validation. So again, focusing on the product and the feature set and making sure you have that correct. Now, once you do and you've validated that, you're moving up into the should have phase. Now, this is where you're focusing on getting your messaging right. So at the bottom, focusing on product. The step above that, focusing on messaging. Once you have both of those things right, then you're focusing on getting the business right, quote unquote. So that's why we talk about business systems up here, because if you have the product validated and you have the message validated, that means that you have the right app and you have people coming toward your app. Now you're growing, or now you have the opportunity to grow. So efforts here should really be focused on making sure that your business is optimized in a way that allows for scale. In other words, you can continue bringing more and more users onto the app and support that. Support it from a literal support standpoint, support it from a feature set standpoint. Support it from a personal standpoint to make sure you are able to continue putting in the work required. So business systems can come in the form of hiring. Maybe you bring on additional team members to help you support this growth. It can also mean investing in other tools, but to simplify it, at the root, what you're looking to do is create repeatable processes that produce a certain outcome. So when you're in the product validation stage, the messaging validation stage, there's a lot of manual work involved. We're not automating a lot yet because we have to get that validation first to justify the automation. But once you have all of the validation, you do need to start making sure that everything can happen in a repeatable way. When you schedule or create marketing materials, what is the process required to create those? And how can it be repeated in a way to where you can automate it with a tool or you can hand it off to someone else? Same thing with some of the development components. As you intake maybe support tickets, how can you create repeatable processes that will allow someone else to handle those? Or maybe to allow users to handle them better themselves, or even with the actual development and the iterations of your app. How can you create repeatable processes internally that will make it so that you can focus on the business as a whole and no one person is handling too much of the load? When that happens, there's a bottleneck in your business and you're not going to be able to continue growing with your product, with your user base, or for yourself personally. So remember, we start at the very top with your vision, and that essentially dictates how your app and your company is going to impact your users, because you want to change people's lives, their day-to-day processes, their businesses. You want to have a genuine impact on your target market, and you also want to make sure you understand how this is going to impact you personally. What are your personal goals? There's no shame in making sure that you are also growing too. That's part of it, and those two things have to be combined. Once you do have that vision defined, then you can work your way back down to the bottom. Create those must-haves, get that validation. Create the should-haves, get the validation. And then work on your business so that you can continue back up and really make that vision come to life. And don't forget that certain components have to come within each of these phases, not all at once. So we start at the bottom with the must-have development, the domain, and the pilot user outreach. We get the validation. Then we move up to the should-haves. Let's make sure users can consistently achieve a certain outcome with the app. Then we start expanding on the website. And then we start testing out that marketing and messaging so that we can get that next level of validation. And that's when we start to hone in on those business systems to allow for scale. Hey, and if you are working your way up toward that scale, then these videos on the screen right here are the next ones you need to watch.